Welcome, friend, to another journey together. We're so glad to have you here. Tonight, we will explore ancient secrets that hold the key to letting go of suffering and finding deep, lasting peace. If you'd like, feel free to share what time it is and where you are listening from. Let the weight of the day begin to dissolve. Feel your breath naturally softening as you settle into this moment. There is nowhere else you need to be, nothing else you need to accomplish. This time belongs to you, to your healing, to your peace. For centuries, seekers have gathered under starlit skies and in silent temples to explore the deepest questions of human existence. Why do we suffer? How can we find lasting peace? What does it mean to truly let go? Tonight, these ancient wisdoms come to you, whispered like a gentle lullaby to soothe both mind and heart. The Buddha once said that life contains suffering, but he also revealed something far more hopeful. That suffering, no matter how deep, is not our permanent state. It is not who we are. Like clouds passing through an endless sky, our pain too can move through us and beyond us, leaving behind the clear, peaceful awareness that has always been our true nature. Imagine, if you will, a vast garden where every kind of flower grows. Some blooms are radiant and sweet, filling the air with perfume. Others are thorny, some wilt quickly, and some struggle to grow in difficult soil. This garden is your life, and every experience, every emotion, every moment of joy or sorrow is part of its natural landscape. We often make the mistake of believing that a good life should contain only beautiful flowers. We chase after roses and push away the thorns. We water only what pleases us and neglect the rest. But the Buddha's first great insight was profoundly simple and radically accepting. All gardens contain both beauty and difficulty. This is not a flaw in the design. This is the design itself. When he sat beneath the Bodhi tree 2,500 years ago, Prince Siddhartha was not seeking to escape life's challenges. He had already tried that. Born into luxury, he had lived behind palace walls where every need was met and every discomfort hidden. But despite all the pleasure and protection, something felt incomplete. A restlessness lived in his heart, a sense that there must be something more to existence than the endless cycle of seeking satisfaction and avoiding pain. So he left the palace. He wandered for years as an ascetic, trying the opposite approach. If pleasure could not bring lasting peace, perhaps deprivation could. He fasted until his body was skeletal. He meditated in extremes of heat and cold. He punished his flesh, believing that suffering might be the path to wisdom. But this too failed to bring the peace he sought. It was only when he stopped running from life and toward it, when he stopped trying to force awakening through extreme measures, that true understanding dawned. Sitting quietly under that ancient tree, neither indulging nor denying, neither grasping nor pushing away, he simply observed. And in that space of pure observation, the truth revealed itself. Life contains suffering, yes, but we create additional suffering through our resistance to this basic fact. We suffer when we lose something precious, and then we suffer again by believing we should not have to experience loss. We feel pain when someone hurts us, and then we compound that pain by replaying the injury over and over in our minds. We face uncertainty about the future, and then we torment ourselves by demanding to know what cannot be known. This additional layer of suffering, the Buddha realized, is optional. While we cannot always control what happens to us, we can learn to change our relationship to what happens. We can stop fighting reality and learn to move with it, like a skilled dancer following the rhythm of music, rather than trying to force the music to match their preferred steps. Think of a tree in a storm. The rigid tree that refuses to bend will snap and break, but the tree that sways with the wind, that allows the storm to move through its branches without resistance, remains rooted and whole. This is the wisdom the Buddha discovered. Not how to avoid life's storms, but how to remain unbroken within them. This understanding does not make us passive or resigned. A tree that bends in the wind is not giving up. It is responding wisely to conditions as they are, not as it wishes they were. In the same way, when we stop exhausting ourselves fighting against reality, we discover energy we never knew we had. Energy for kindness, for creativity, for genuine engagement with life as it unfolds. Tonight, as you rest here listening to these words, you are practicing this very wisdom. Instead of resisting the tiredness in your body or the thoughts that arise in your mind, you are simply allowing them to be present. You are creating space for your experience without judgment, without the need to fix or change anything. This is the beginning of all healing. The first teaching of the Buddha is sometimes translated as life is suffering, but this translation misses the deeper meaning. The original word was dukkha, which means more like dissatisfaction, unease, or the sense that something is slightly off. It's the feeling you get when you're wearing a shoe with a small pebble inside. The pebble doesn't make walking impossible, but it creates a constant, low-level discomfort that colors your entire journey. Much of human suffering is like this pebble. It's not the dramatic tragedies, though those certainly occur. It's the everyday friction of wanting things to be different than they are. The traffic that makes us late, the weather that doesn't match our plans, the people who don't behave as we think they should. The constant, subtle tension of resistance creates a background hum of unease that we often don't even notice until it stops. But here's what the Buddha discovered, and what you can discover too. When we stop trying to shake the pebble out of our shoe and instead learn to walk with awareness, something remarkable happens. Sometimes the pebble simply falls out on its own. Sometimes we find it's not actually a pebble at all, but simply a wrinkle in our sock that can be smoothed out with a gentle adjustment. And sometimes the pebble remains, but our awareness grows so spacious that we hardly notice it anymore. This is not about becoming numb or indifferent. It's about developing what the Buddha called wise understanding. Instead of immediately labeling every uncomfortable sensation as wrong or bad, we pause, we breathe, we observe with curiosity rather than judgment. What is actually happening right now? What am I adding to this experience through my thoughts and reactions? Consider the last time you felt frustrated. Perhaps you were stuck in traffic or waiting in a long line. The external situation was simply what it was, but your mind likely added a whole story. This always happens to me. I don't have time for this. This is ruining my day. Each thought was like adding another pebble to your shoe. The original delay was just a fact, but the story your mind created around it became a source of additional suffering. The practice is not to eliminate these stories entirely. That would be impossible and unnecessary. The practice is to notice them arising and recognize them for what they are. Mental habits, automatic responses, old patterns of thinking that may have once served a purpose, but now often create more problems than they solve. When you notice yourself caught in one of these mental loops, you have a choice. You can continue feeding the story, making it bigger and more dramatic, or you can gently redirect your attention to what is actually present. Your breath, the sensation of your body in this moment, the sounds around you, the simple fact of being alive and aware. This redirection is not suppression. You're not pushing the thoughts away or pretending they don't exist. You're simply choosing where to place your attention, like adjusting the focus on a camera. When you focus on the story your mind is telling, that story becomes vivid and all-consuming. When you focus on your immediate sensory experience, the story naturally fades into the background. This shift in focus is one of the most powerful tools for reducing suffering that has ever been discovered. It's available to you in any moment, in any circumstance. You don't need special equipment or perfect conditions. You don't need to wait until your life problems are solved or until you feel ready. You can practice it right now as you lie here listening to these words. Feel the weight of your body resting. Notice the rhythm of your breath. Let your attention settle into this moment without trying to make it anything other than what it is. If thoughts arise about tomorrow's responsibilities or yesterday's regrets, that's perfectly natural. Simply notice them like clouds drifting across the sky of your awareness and gently return your attention to the immediate reality of breathing, of being, of resting. This is the foundation of all Buddhist practice, not the elimination of difficult experiences, but the cultivation of a different relationship to them. A relationship based on awareness rather than reactivity, acceptance rather than resistance, presence rather than mental time travel to past or future. Let us now explore something even deeper. As you rest here in the gentle darkness, breathing softly, we turn to examine how much of our suffering comes not from life itself, but from the intricate web of expectations we weave around life. There is an ancient story about a spider who spent her entire life spinning the most beautiful web. Each strand was perfectly placed, each connection exactly as she intended. The web was her masterpiece, her identity, her security. She polished it daily, repaired every tiny break, and defended it fiercely from any disturbance. One morning, a strong wind came and tore the web apart. The spider was devastated. She had lost everything she thought she was, everything she thought she needed. She sat in despair, surrounded by scattered silk, feeling completely broken. But as the sun rose and illuminated the dewdrops still clinging to the fragments, something beautiful became visible. The scattered strands caught the light like tiny prisms, creating rainbows more lovely than anything the perfect web had ever displayed. The spider realized that her attachment to the web's form had blinded her to its deeper beauty. This story speaks to one of the Buddha's most profound insights about the nature of suffering. Much of our pain comes not from what happens to us, but from our attachment to how we think things should be. We weave webs of expectation, identity, and control. and then suffer when life's inevitable winds disturb our carefully constructed patterns. Attachment, in Buddhist understanding, is not the same as love or care. You can love deeply without being attached. You can care profoundly without clinging. Attachment is the sticky quality of mind that says, "This must always be this way," or "I cannot be happy unless this particular outcome occurs." It's the difference between holding something with an open palm versus gripping it with a closed fist. Think about a relationship you care about deeply. Love appreciates this person as they are, enjoys their presence, and wishes for their well-being. Attachment, however, adds conditions. It says, "I love you, but only if you continue to meet my needs in this specific way." It says, "I love you, but you must never change or leave or die." Love flows freely. Attachment creates contracts and expectations that no human being can fulfill forever. We become attached not only to people, but to ideas about ourselves. I am successful. I am healthy. I am in control. I am safe. These identities feel solid and permanent, but life has a way of challenging every story we tell about who we are. The successful person faces failure. The healthy person becomes ill. The person who values control encounters chaos. The one who feels safe meets uncertainty. When these challenges arise, we have two choices. We can fight desperately to maintain our cherished identities, creating enormous stress and suffering in the process. Or we can recognize that these identities were always temporary constructions, like clouds in the sky or waves on the ocean. They arise, they exist for a while, and they naturally dissolve. We are not diminished by their passing. We are simply revealed to be larger than any single identity could contain. This does not mean we should not have goals or preferences or dreams. The Buddha was not teaching nihilism or apathy. He was pointing to the difference between flowing with life's changes and rigidly resisting them. A river has a destination, but it doesn't fight every rock or turn in its path. It finds a way around obstacles, sometimes carving new channels when necessary. It moves toward the ocean while remaining fluid, adaptable, responsive to the landscape it encounters. Consider how often we create suffering through our resistance to change. We want our loved ones to remain exactly as they were when we first felt deeply connected to them. We want our bodies to maintain their youth and strength indefinitely. We want our careers to provide consistent security and satisfaction. We want our communities and cultures to preserve what we find valuable while adapting to what we think needs improvement. These desires are natural and understandable. But when they become rigid demands rather than gentle preferences, they separate us from reality. Reality is constant change. Reality is uncertainty. Reality is the fact that everything we love will eventually transform or pass away. This is not a punishment or a cosmic mistake. This is simply how life works. The practice of letting go does not require us to stop caring or to become emotionally numb. It asks us to care in a way that does not depend on permanence, to love what is present while holding it lightly, to engage fully with life while remembering that all forms are temporary. Imagine holding a beautiful butterfly in your cupped hands. You can appreciate its colors, its delicate structure, the miracle of its existence. But if you close your hands to keep it forever, you will crush the very thing you love. The beauty of the butterfly includes its freedom to fly away. Your appreciation can be complete even though your time together is brief. This is the kind of love the Buddha taught. Not the grasping love that demands permanence, but the spacious love that allows for change. Not the fearful love that tries to control outcomes, but the trusting love that remains open to whatever unfolds. When we begin to practice this kind of letting go, something unexpected happens. Instead of losing what we love, we often find ourselves more capable of truly enjoying it. When we're not constantly worried about loss, we can be fully present for what we have. When we're not trying to force people or situations to remain frozen in time, we can appreciate their natural evolution and growth. A mother who clings to her child's dependence may miss the joy of watching that child develop independence and confidence. A person who insists that their career define their worth may never discover other sources of meaning and fulfillment. Someone who demands that their body never age or change may spend years fighting a battle that cannot be won, instead of finding new ways to appreciate and care for their physical form. The practice of non-attachment is not about caring less. It's about caring more skillfully. It's about loving in a way that supports growth and change rather than demanding stagnation. It's about finding security not in controlling external conditions, but in developing an inner stability that can weather any storm. This inner stability is not something you create through effort or discipline. It's something you uncover by removing the layers of clinging and resistance that obscure it. Like the sky that remains clear and spacious, whether clouds are present or absent, your essential nature is already whole and unshakable. The clouds of attachment may temporarily obscure this truth, but they cannot fundamentally alter it. As you rest here tonight, allow yourself to feel this spaciousness. Notice how your breath flows in and out without your conscious control. Observe how thoughts arise and pass away without your needing to manage them. Feel how your heart beats steadily, how your body knows how to rest and heal itself. This natural flowing and letting go is happening constantly within you. You don't need to learn how to let go so much as you need to stop interfering with the letting go that is always occurring. Your thoughts will change without your effort. Your feelings will shift like weather patterns. Your body will continue its processes of renewal and release. The invitation is not to fight these natural rhythms, but to align yourself with them. To trust the wisdom that already knows how to let go, how to flow, how to find balance without your mental interference. This trust does not develop overnight. For most of us, the habit of grasping is strong. We've been taught that holding on is how we keep ourselves safe, how we maintain what we value, how we control our destiny. Learning to let go feels risky, even dangerous. What if I lose everything that matters to me? What if letting go means giving up? But the Buddha's discovery, verified by countless practitioners over millennia, is exactly the opposite. It is our grasping that causes us to lose touch with what truly matters. It is our attempts at control that create chaos. It is our resistance to change that prevents us from adapting and thriving in new circumstances. When we learn to hold our preferences lightly, we often find that life organizes itself more harmoniously than our worried minds could ever arrange. When we stop fighting against uncertainty, we discover resources of wisdom and resilience we never knew we possessed. When we release our death grip on outcomes, we become available for opportunities and connections that our narrow focus had prevented us from seeing. This is not magical thinking or wishful fantasy. This is the practical result of aligning ourselves with how life actually works rather than how we think it should work. Like learning to swim by relaxing into the water's support rather than fighting against it. Learning to let go allows us to move through life with much less effort and much greater grace. The spider in our story eventually learned to appreciate the beauty that could only emerge when her rigid patterns were dissolved. She discovered that her creativity was not limited to one perfect web, but could express itself in countless forms. She found that her security came not from preserving any particular creation, but from trusting her ability to respond wisely to whatever conditions arose. You too have this capacity for creative response. You too can learn to find security in flexibility rather than rigidity. The winds of change that sometimes tear apart your carefully constructed plans are not your enemies. They are invitations to discover new forms of beauty, new sources of strength, new ways of being that you could never have imagined from inside your familiar patterns. This wisdom of letting go extends beyond our personal attachments to the very way we move through life itself. Let me share with you a story that illuminates this truth. There once was a village beside a great river where the people had forgotten how to trust the current. Familiar patterns. There once was a village beside a great river where the people had forgotten how to trust the current. Their ancestors had known how to build boats that could move gracefully with the flow, but over generations, this knowledge was lost. Instead, the villagers spent their days building elaborate dams and channels, trying to force the river to move according to their plans. They worked tirelessly day after day, fighting against the water's natural course. The more they struggled to control the river, the more chaotic it became. Floods destroyed their crops. Droughts left their reservoirs empty. The harder they worked to impose their will, the more the river seemed to resist their efforts. One day, an old woman who had been watching the struggle for years sat down by the riverbank and simply observed. She noticed how the water naturally flowed around rocks rather than trying to push them aside. She watched how it carved gentle curves through the landscape, finding the path of least resistance while still moving steadily toward its destination. She saw how the river was both persistent and yielding, powerful and soft. Inspired by this observation, the old woman built a simple boat and stepped into the current. Instead of fighting against the river's movement, she worked with it. When the water curved left, she allowed her boat to follow. When it picked up speed, she let herself be carried. When it slowed in deeper pools, she rested and appreciated the calm. To the villagers watching from the shore, it looked like magic. The old woman moved downstream with such ease and grace, covering more distance in an hour than their forced efforts had achieved in weeks. But it wasn't magic. It was simply the wisdom of cooperation instead of opposition, of partnership instead of domination. This story reflects one of the Buddha's deepest insights about suffering and the end of suffering. Much of our pain comes from our attempt to force life to conform to our preferences. We exhaust ourselves trying to make the river of existence flow uphill, trying to make temporary things permanent, trying to make other people think and feel and behave exactly as we wish they would. But what if there's another way? What if the same intelligence that guides the river, that turns seeds into flowers and coordinates the dance of planets around stars, is also available to guide our lives? What if our job is not to control every outcome, but to learn how to move skillfully within the larger patterns of existence? This doesn't mean becoming passive or abandoning all effort. The old woman in the story was not lazy. She still had to steer her boat, still had to read the water and respond to changing conditions. But her efforts were aligned with natural forces rather than opposed to them. She worked with the river instead of against it. In your own life, you can begin to recognize the difference between flowing with life and fighting against it. When you're flowing, even difficult situations feel workable. Challenges become interesting problems to solve rather than personal attacks to defend against. You find yourself curious about how things will unfold rather than anxious about controlling outcomes. When you're fighting against life, everything feels harder than it needs to be. You spend enormous energy trying to force solutions that don't quite fit. You become frustrated when people don't respond to your efforts to change them. You feel like you're swimming upstream, making little progress despite great exertion. The practice of surrendering to life's flow doesn't mean giving up your values or abandoning your goals. It means pursuing them in harmony with conditions as they actually exist, rather than as you wish they existed. It means being willing to adjust your methods when reality provides feedback that your current approach isn't working. Think of the last time you found yourself in a situation that felt completely out of your control. Perhaps you were stuck in traffic during an important appointment, or waiting for medical test results, or watching a loved one make choices you believed would hurt them. In those moments, you probably experienced firsthand the exhaustion that comes from trying to force the river to flow uphill. The practice of surrendering to life's flow doesn't mean giving up your values or abandoning your goals. It means pursuing them in harmony with conditions as they actually exist, rather than as you wish they existed. It means being willing to adjust your methods when reality provides feedback that your current approach isn't working. Consider a skilled sailor navigating the ocean. She has a destination in mind, but she doesn't try to sail directly into a headwind. Instead, she uses the wind's energy to move toward her goal, sometimes taking a zigzag path that seems longer, but actually gets her there with much less struggle. She reads the weather, adjusts her sails, and finds creative ways to work with natural forces rather than against them. This is the kind of wisdom that emerges when we stop fighting life and start dancing with it. We begin to recognize that obstacles are not necessarily enemies, but sometimes opportunities to discover new paths we would never have considered. Delays are not always frustrations, but sometimes divine timing that allows other pieces to fall into place. Endings are not only losses, but also openings for new beginnings we could not have imagined while clinging to what was. Now, let us turn our attention to something equally profound. In the gentle rhythm of your breathing, we can find a perfect teacher about acceptance and surrender. Your lungs do not force the air in, nor do they grasp it desperately once it arrives. They simply allow the natural rhythm of expansion and contraction, receiving each breath as a gift and releasing it without reluctance. This is the rhythm of all life when we stop interfering with it. Receiving and releasing, opening and letting go. Like waves on the shore, like seasons cycling through the year, Like the beating of your heart, existence moves in natural patterns of embrace and release. When we align ourselves with these patterns, rather than fighting against them, life becomes not a series of problems to solve, but a dance to participate in. But how do we learn this dance? How do we retrain minds that have been conditioned to grab and control and worry? The Buddha offered a path, and it begins with something so simple that we often overlook its power. It begins with noticing what is actually happening right now, in this very moment, without immediately trying to change it. This practice is sometimes called mindfulness, but that word has become so common that we might miss its radical implications. True mindfulness is not just awareness. It's awareness without agenda. It's the courage to observe your experience exactly as it is, without immediately reaching for judgments or solutions or escapes. When you feel sadness arising, mindfulness doesn't ask you to become happy. It asks you to become curious about sadness. What does it feel like in your body? Where do you notice it most strongly? How does it move and change as you observe it? When you stop treating sadness as a problem to fix and start experiencing it as a natural part of the human emotional spectrum, something remarkable happens. The sadness doesn't necessarily disappear, but your suffering about the sadness begins to dissolve. This distinction is crucial and often misunderstood. Pain and suffering are not the same thing. Pain is what happens when life presents us with loss, disappointment, physical discomfort, or any of the countless challenges that are part of being human. Suffering is what we add to pain through our resistance, our stories about why this shouldn't be happening, our desperate attempts to make the pain go away before it's ready to leave naturally. Imagine you're walking barefoot and you step on a thorn. The sharp sensation is pain, and it's completely natural and appropriate. Your nervous system is doing its job, alerting you to potential harm. But then your mind might begin adding layers. I'm so clumsy. I always do things like this. This is going to ruin my whole day. Why do bad things always happen to me? I can't stand this pain. Each of these thoughts creates additional suffering on top of the original physical sensation. The thorn hurts, yes, but the stories about the thorn often hurt more than the thorn itself. And unlike the thorn, which you can simply remove, the stories can continue causing pain long after the original incident has passed. You might find yourself telling others about your clumsiness, replaying the moment over and over, or becoming anxious about future walks. The Buddha's insight was that while we cannot always avoid the thorns of life, we can learn to extract them cleanly without embedding them deeper through our mental reactions. We can feel the pain without creating suffering. We can experience loss without adding the torment of resistance. We can face uncertainty without compounding it with anxiety about the uncertainty. This learning happens gradually, gently, like water, slowly wearing smooth the rough edges of a stone. Each time you notice your mind creating stories about your experience and choose instead to return to the simple reality of what is actually present, you are practicing this ancient wisdom. Each time you feel an emotion without immediately trying to fix it or push it away, you are discovering your natural capacity for acceptance. Let us explore this capacity more deeply through another story. In a mountain village, there lived an old man who was known throughout the region for his unshakable peace. People would come from far and wide seeking his secret. How did he remain so calm when others were anxious? How did he stay centered when life brought challenges? One day, a young woman approached him with great agitation. "Master," she said, "I've lost my job, my relationship is falling apart, and my health is failing. How can you sit there so peacefully when the world is full of such suffering?" The old man listened with complete attention, then gestured toward a nearby mountain stream. "Do you see how the water flows around the rocks?" he asked. "The rocks are solid, immovable. The water is soft, yielding. Yet over time, which one shapes the other?" The woman looked at the stream, watching how the water carved graceful channels around every obstacle. "The water shapes the rocks," she said slowly. "Yes," the old man replied. "And which one fights against what it encounters?" "The rocks remain rigid while the water flows around them," she realized. "Now tell me," the old man continued gently, "when troubles come to you, do you wish to be like the rock or like the water?" This teaching points to something profound about the nature of strength and resilience. We often think that being strong means being hard, unmovable, resistant to change. But the old man's wisdom suggests that true strength might be more like water, soft and yielding, yet capable of wearing away mountains. When we practice being like water in the face of life's challenges, we discover that flexibility is often more powerful than rigidity. A tree that bends in the storm is more likely to survive than one that stands rigid and breaks. A relationship that can adapt to change is more likely to endure than one that insists everything remain exactly as it was. This doesn't mean becoming passive or accepting harmful situations without response. Water is not weak. It carves canyons, moves continents, and finds its way through any barrier given enough time. But it does so through persistence and adaptability, rather than force and resistance. In your own life, you can begin to experiment with this water-like approach to challenges. Instead of immediately pushing against what you don't like, pause and ask yourself, how might I flow around this obstacle? What would it look like to respond with flexibility rather than rigidity? How can I maintain my essential direction while adapting my methods to current conditions? Sometimes this means taking a different route toward your goals. Sometimes it means adjusting your timeline. Sometimes it means discovering that what you thought was an obstacle was actually pointing you towards something better than what you originally had in mind. As we continue this gentle exploration, allow yourself to sink deeper into the comfort of your resting place. Feel how your body naturally knows how to be like water, softening into whatever surface supports you. Notice how your breath flows without effort, finding its own rhythm without your conscious management. These are examples of the water-like wisdom that already lives within you. There is another aspect of acceptance that the Buddha taught, and it may surprise you with its gentleness. True acceptance is not resignation or defeat. It's not giving up on positive change or becoming indifferent to suffering. True acceptance is an act of love. It's the willingness to meet reality with an open heart rather than a closed fist. When you accept your sadness, you're not saying, "I want to be sad forever." You're saying, "I acknowledge that sadness is present right now, and I'm willing to be with it without immediately trying to make it go away." This creates space for the sadness to be felt, to be honored, and ultimately to transform naturally. When you accept someone else's difficult behavior, You're not saying, I approve of how they're acting. You're saying, I recognize that this is how they are behaving right now, and I'm choosing to respond from clarity rather than reactivity. This creates space for skillful action rather than knee-jerk reaction. When you accept a challenging situation, you're not saying, I like this situation. You're saying, this is what's happening right now, and I'm going to work with it as it is, rather than exhausting myself, wishing it were different. This creates space for creative solutions that you might never discover while lost in resistance. This kind of acceptance requires great courage because it asks us to feel our feelings fully, to see situations clearly, and to respond authentically rather than automatically. It's much easier to numb ourselves, or distract ourselves, or fight against what we don't like. But the Buddha discovered, and countless practitioners have verified, that the path through difficulties is always more graceful than the path around them. Resistance creates tension in the body, agitation in the mind, and distance in relationships. Acceptance creates space for healing, clarity for wise action, and connection even in difficult moments. This doesn't mean we become doormats or that we stop working toward positive change. It means we learn to work from a place of peace rather than from a place of conflict. Let me offer you another way to understand this. Imagine you're in a darkened room trying to find your way to the door. You could spend your energy cursing the darkness, demanding that someone turn on the light, or bumping frantically into furniture. Or you could accept the reality of the darkness and allow your eyes to adjust, moving slowly and carefully, feeling your way toward the exit. Both approaches acknowledge that you want to reach the door, but one approach creates additional struggle and suffering, while the other works skillfully with conditions as they are. The darkness is not your enemy to fight. It's simply a condition to navigate wisely. In the same way, whatever difficulties you're facing in your life are not necessarily enemies to defeat. They may be conditions to navigate with wisdom, opportunities to develop new skills, or invitations to discover strength and compassion you didn't know you possessed. As we near the end of this portion of our journey together, let yourself feel the truth of these teachings, not just as ideas, but as lived experience. Right now, in this moment, you are practicing acceptance simply by allowing yourself to rest. You're not fighting against tiredness or trying to force alertness. You're flowing with your body's natural need for stillness and restoration. This is a perfect example of how acceptance works. You're not being lazy or giving up. You're responding wisely to what your body and mind need right now. You're trusting the natural rhythms of activity and rest, engagement and withdrawal, learning and integration. In this trust, in this willingness to be exactly where you are without apology or resistance, you're touching the very heart of Buddhist wisdom. You're discovering that peace is not something you have to earn or achieve or wait for. It's something you can recognize right here, right now, in this very moment of acceptance. Take a deep breath and let it out slowly. Feel the profound relief that comes when you stop fighting against what is and start flowing with it. This relief is always available to you in any moment, in any circumstance. It's as close as your next breath, as accessible as your willingness to soften rather than harden, to open rather than close, to trust rather than control. The path continues to unfold before us, but already you are walking it. Already you are discovering the freedom that lies not in getting everything you want, but in wanting what you have. Not in controlling every outcome, but in trusting your ability to respond wisely to whatever comes. Not in avoiding all pain, but in meeting it with such courage and compassion that it becomes a teacher rather than an enemy. As we journey deeper into this sanctuary of understanding, let us now explore one of the most transformative discoveries we can make. In the quietness of your breathing, in the stillness of this moment, lies a profound truth about the nature of compassion and how it relates to our ability to let go of suffering. There is a tenderness that emerges when we stop fighting our experience and start embracing it with kindness. This tenderness is not weakness. It is the beginning of true strength. It is the recognition that our pain, our confusion, our very humanity deserves the same gentle attention we would offer to a beloved friend who was struggling. Often, when we think about letting go of suffering, we imagine it as a kind of spiritual achievement, something we must earn through perfect practice or flawless understanding. But the Buddha's approach was radically different. He taught that the path to freedom begins not with perfection, but with compassion, not with getting rid of our difficulties, but with changing how we relate to them. Listen to this ancient story. A woman came to the Buddha carrying her dead child, pleading with him to bring the baby back to life. The Buddha looked at her with infinite tenderness and said, "I will help you. But first you must bring me a mustard seed from a household that has never known grief." Desperate with hope, the woman ran from house to house throughout the village. At each door, she asked for a mustard seed from a family untouched by loss. But everywhere she went, she heard stories of sorrow. A father who had died young, a sister lost to illness, a grandparent who had passed peacefully but was deeply missed. Every household had known the touch of grief. As the day wore on, something began to shift in the woman's heart. Her own pain didn't disappear, but it began to feel less isolating. She started to see that her suffering was not a punishment or a mistake, but part of the great human experience that connects us all. By evening, she returned to the Buddha, no longer carrying her child, but carrying instead a profound understanding. "Master," she said, "I could not find what you asked for, but I found something else. I found that I am not alone in my sorrow." The Buddha nodded gently. "Now you understand the first step on the path to healing. Suffering shared is suffering transformed." This story illuminates something crucial about the nature of compassion and healing. When we try to carry our pain in isolation, believing that we alone have been singled out for difficulty, our suffering becomes much heavier than it needs to be. But when we recognize that pain is part of the shared human experience, that everyone we meet is carrying some form of struggle, our hearts begin to soften, not only toward ourselves, but toward all beings. This softening is the beginning of what Buddhists call loving kindness, or metta. It's the practice of extending the same warmth and understanding to ourselves that we would naturally offer to someone we care about deeply. When a friend comes to you with a broken heart, you don't tell them to stop being sad. You don't judge them for their tears. You simply hold space for their pain with presence and care. The invitation now is to offer this same quality of presence to your own experience. Whatever you've been carrying, whatever has been causing you to suffer, can you meet it with the same gentleness you would offer to a dear friend? Can you acknowledge that your pain makes sense, that it's a natural response to the challenges you've faced? Let us sit with this for a moment. Feel into any area of your life where you've been harsh with yourself, where you've been impatient with your own healing process, or critical of your own struggles. Now imagine that instead of yourself, a beloved friend was experiencing exactly what you've been going through. How would you speak to them? What words of comfort would you offer? What understanding would you extend? The words that arise spontaneously for your friend, these same words are available for you. The compassion that flows naturally toward others' pain can also flow toward your own. This is not self-indulgence or self-pity. This is the radical act of treating yourself as someone worthy of kindness. This shift in how we relate to our own suffering creates the foundation for genuine healing. When we stop adding the extra layer of self-judgment to our pain, the pain itself often begins to transform. When we stop exhausting ourselves by fighting against our own experience, energy becomes available for genuine growth and change. Consider how differently you move through the world when you're at peace with yourself versus when you're at war with yourself. When you're constantly battling your own thoughts and feelings, much of your life force gets consumed in internal conflict. But when you learn to hold your experience with kindness, that same energy becomes available for creativity, for connection, for the kind of wise action that arises from inner stillness rather than inner turmoil. Now, let us explore how this compassionate approach extends beyond our relationship with ourselves to our relationships with others. One of the most challenging aspects of letting go of suffering involves releasing our need for other people to be different than they are. So much of our daily frustration comes from the gap between how we think people should behave and how they actually behave. Your partner should be more attentive. Your children should be more responsible. Your co-workers should be more considerate. Your family should be more understanding. The drivers on the road should be more careful. The politicians should be more honest. The list of how others should change in order for you to be at peace can become endless. But here's what the Buddha discovered through his own deep observation. Other people's behavior is like the weather. It has its own patterns and rhythms that are largely independent of your preferences. You can dress appropriately for the weather and take shelter when necessary, but you cannot control whether it rains or shines. This doesn't mean we become passive in relationships or that we stop having boundaries or preferences. It means we learn to respond to others from a place of clarity about what we can and cannot control. We can control our own actions, our own responses, our own level of kindness and wisdom. We cannot control other people's choices, reactions, or timing. When we truly understand this, a great burden lifts from our shoulders. We stop carrying the impossible responsibility of making everyone around us behave the way we think they should. We stop taking other people's moods and choices as personal attacks on our peace of mind. We begin to see that everyone, just like us, is doing their best with the level of awareness and skill they currently possess. This perspective doesn't excuse harmful behavior or mean we should accept mistreatment, but it allows us to respond to difficulties in relationships from a place of understanding rather than reactivity. When someone is harsh with you, instead of immediately taking it personally and responding with equal harshness, you might pause and recognize that their behavior probably has more to do with their own pain than with anything you've done. This recognition doesn't require you to absorb their pain or fix their problems. It simply allows you to respond with wisdom rather than wounds. You might choose to offer kindness if that feels appropriate, or you might choose to protect yourself by creating distance. But either response can come from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. Let me share another story that illustrates this beautifully. A Zen master was walking down a busy street when a man, running late for an important meeting, accidentally bumped into him, knocking him to the ground. The man didn't stop to apologize or even acknowledge what had happened. He simply kept running. The master's students, who had witnessed the incident, were outraged. "Master," they said, "that man was incredibly rude. He should have stopped to help you up and apologize." The master dusted himself off and smiled gently. "Why should he apologize to me for his own suffering?" he asked. "Could you not see how much pain he was in? How anxious and disconnected from the present moment? I feel compassion for him." This response illustrates the profound shift that happens when we begin to see others' difficult behavior as a reflection of their own inner struggle, rather than as a personal attack on us. The man who knocked down the master was indeed acting unconsciously, but his unconsciousness was causing him to suffer much more than it was causing the master to suffer. When we understand this deeply, we discover that forgiveness is not something we do for others' sake. It's something we do for our own sake. Holding on to resentment is like gripping a hot coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending that harmful actions didn't happen or that they were acceptable. It means releasing the ongoing story of victimhood that keeps us tied to past hurts. It means choosing to respond to life from the present moment rather than from old wounds. This kind of forgiveness often happens gradually, layer by layer, like healing from a deep physical injury. You don't need to force it or make it happen according to any particular timeline. You simply need to be willing to soften whenever softening feels possible, to release whatever feels ready to be released. Sometimes forgiveness begins with forgiving yourself for having been hurt, for having trusted someone who wasn't trustworthy, for having been naive or vulnerable. Sometimes it continues with forgiving the other person for being human, for making mistakes, for acting from their own fear or pain rather than from wisdom. And sometimes the deepest forgiveness is forgiving life itself for not being the safe, predictable, fair experience we thought it should be, for including loss and disappointment and uncertainty as inevitable parts of the human journey. As we continue to explore these teachings together, let yourself feel into any places where forgiveness might be ready to bloom in your heart. Not because you should forgive, but because forgiveness might be a gift you're ready to give to yourself. The gift of freedom from carrying old hurts, the gift of space for new experiences, the gift of approaching relationships from openness rather than defensiveness. This process of compassionate release extends to more than just our relationships with people. It includes our relationship with our own past, with our mistakes and regrets, with the paths we didn't take and the choices we wish we had made differently. So many of us carry a heavy backpack filled with old decisions we wish we could undo. If only I had chosen a different career. If only I had been braver in love. If only I had spent more time with my parents before they died. If only I had taken better care of my health when I was younger. The weight of these regrets can make each step forward feel more difficult than it needs to be. But consider this possibility. What if every choice you made, even the ones that caused pain, was somehow necessary for you to become who you are right now? What if your mistakes were not detours from your path, but essential parts of your path? What if the very experiences you most regret were also the experiences that developed your capacity for compassion, wisdom, and understanding? This doesn't mean that all choices are equally skillful or that actions don't have consequences. It means that the path forward from any point is always more important than the path that led you to this point. You cannot change the past, but you can change your relationship to the past. You cannot undo your mistakes, but you can learn from them and use that learning to make wiser choices going forward. The Buddha taught that enlightenment is possible in any moment, regardless of your history. No matter what you've done or failed to do, no matter how long you've been stuck in patterns that cause suffering, this very moment contains the possibility of awakening. This very breath contains the opportunity to begin again. This is one of the most liberating truths in all of Buddhist teaching. You don't have to wait until you've perfected yourself to begin experiencing peace. You don't have to fix all your problems before you deserve compassion. You don't have to earn the right to let go of suffering. That right is yours simply by virtue of being alive and aware. In the gentle darkness surrounding you now, in the rhythm of your breathing, in the simple fact of your consciousness resting and receiving these words, awakening is already present. Not as something you need to achieve, but as something you can recognize. Not as something you need to become, but as something you already are beneath all the stories of struggle and inadequacy. Let this recognition settle into your bones. Let it soften any places where you've been holding tension against yourself or your life. Let it remind you that the peace you seek is not somewhere in the distant future, waiting for you to become worthy of it. It's here now, waiting for you to stop fighting against it. As we prepare to journey even deeper into these teachings, rest in this truth. You are already whole. You are already worthy of love and peace and freedom from suffering. The path we're walking together is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been, beneath the layers of conditioning and pain and misunderstanding. This remembering happens not through effort, but through release. Not through grasping, but through letting go. Not through becoming perfect, but through accepting yourself exactly as you are right now. In this moment, with complete tenderness and understanding, the journey continues, but you have already arrived at the most important destination. You have arrived at this moment of presence, this breath of peace, this recognition that you are infinitely more than any story of suffering you may have been carrying. In this recognition, healing has already begun. In this sacred space of rest and reflection, let us now turn toward one of the Buddha's most profound insights, a teaching so simple that children can understand it, yet so deep that it can transform everything about how we experience life. It is the truth of impermanence, the recognition that everything that arises will also pass away. Feel your breath for a moment. Notice how each inhale naturally gives way to an exhale. Notice how each exhale creates space for the next inhale. Your breathing does not try to hold on to any particular breath. It does not mourn the passing of the exhale or anxiously anticipate the next inhale. It simply flows, moment by moment, in perfect rhythm with the nature of change itself. This is perhaps the most perfect teacher about impermanence that you carry with you always. Your breath, knows something that your mind often forgets. It knows that holding on creates suffering and letting go creates flow. It knows that endings make room for beginnings and that resistance to change is the source of much unnecessary pain. The Buddha spent years observing this truth in every aspect of existence. He watched clouds form and dissolve in the sky. He saw flowers bloom and wither. He witnessed the cycles of birth and death, youth and aging, meeting and parting that characterize all life. And in this observation, he discovered something remarkable. When we resist these natural cycles, we create suffering. When we align ourselves with them, we discover a peace that no external circumstance can disturb. Let me share with you the story of a woman who learnt this lesson in the most difficult way possible. She had spent years building what she thought was the perfect life. A loving marriage, 2 beautiful children, a career that fulfilled her, a home that felt like a sanctuary. She felt grateful for these blessings, but underneath her gratitude lived a constant, low-level anxiety. What if something happened to this perfect life? What if change came and took away everything she cherished? And then change did come, not all at once, but gradually, the way change usually moves through our lives. Her children grew up and moved away. Her husband's interests evolved in directions that no longer included her. Her body began showing signs of aging. Her career, once exciting, began to feel routine. The home that had once felt like a sanctuary began to feel empty and echoing. At first, she fought against these changes with everything she had. She tried to keep her children close by making them feel guilty about their independence. She attempted to force her marriage back into its earlier patterns through demands and accusations. She spent enormous amounts of energy and money trying to stop the natural aging process. She threw herself into work with desperate intensity, hoping to recapture the enthusiasm she once felt. But the harder she fought against the natural evolution of her life, the more exhausted and bitter she became. Nothing she did could stop the flow of change. Her resistance created additional suffering on top of the natural sadness that comes with life's transitions. Finally, in a moment of complete exhaustion, she stopped fighting. She sat in her empty house and simply allowed herself to feel the full weight of her losses without trying to fix or change or deny anything. And in that moment of complete surrender, something unexpected happened. Instead of being destroyed by her sadness, she discovered that she was large enough to hold it. Instead of being diminished by the changes in her life, she began to sense that she was something more fundamental than any of the roles or relationships or external circumstances that had shifted. She began to touch something that the Buddha called her true nature, the awareness that remains constant even as everything else transforms. This awareness didn't eliminate her sadness about her losses, but it provided a context for the sadness that made it bearable, even meaningful. She realized that her capacity to feel grief was actually a reflection of her capacity to love. Her pain at letting go was evidence of how deeply she had engaged with life. Her sorrow was not a mistake or a weakness, but a natural and even beautiful response to the preciousness of what she had experienced. As the months passed, something even more remarkable began to unfold. With her children living their own lives, she discovered interests and friendships she had never had time to develop while focused on mothering. With her marriage evolving, she found aspects of herself that had been dormant for years. With her body changing, she developed a deeper appreciation for its years of faithful service and a more realistic understanding of what truly mattered for her well-being. The empty house that had once echoed with loneliness began to feel like a sanctuary of solitude where she could finally hear her own thoughts and desires. The routine work that had felt stale became an opportunity to mentor younger colleagues and find meaning in service rather than achievement. Even the signs of aging, which she had once fought so desperately, began to feel like markers of a life fully lived rather than a life being lost. This woman's journey illustrates one of the most counterintuitive truths about human experience. The very changes we resist most strongly are often the changes that free us to discover new sources of happiness and meaning. The losses that feel like endings are frequently the beginnings of chapters we could never have imagined while clinging to what came before. But let us explore this more gently. You don't need to lose everything you love to understand impermanence. You can begin to practice with smaller changes, daily reminders that nothing remains exactly the same from one moment to the next. Notice how your thoughts are constantly changing. One moment you might be thinking about tomorrow's plans. The next moment, remembering a conversation from last week. Then wondering about what you'll have for breakfast. Your mind is like a river, always moving, always flowing. When you try to grasp a particular thought and hold it in place, it slips away like water through your fingers. Notice how your emotions are constantly shifting. Even strong feelings like anger or sadness or joy arise, peak, and then naturally begin to fade. You don't have to make them go away. They leave on their own when their time is complete. Understanding this can bring tremendous relief when you're in the grip of a difficult emotion. "This too shall pass" is not just a comforting saying, it's a description of reality. Notice how your body is constantly changing. Every cell is in a process of renewal. Every breath brings in new air and releases what is no longer needed. Your heartbeat creates a rhythm of contraction and expansion. Your body knows the wisdom of impermanence at the most fundamental level. Even your sense of identity is constantly evolving. The person you are today is different from the person you were 5 years ago, different from the person you were yesterday, different even from the person you were this morning. You grow, you learn, you adapt, you change your mind about things you once felt certain about. This is not a sign of instability or weakness. This is the natural intelligence of a living being responding to life. Now, let us explore how this understanding of impermanence can transform your relationship to difficulty. When you're going through a hard time, it's natural for that difficulty to feel permanent and overwhelming. Depression whispers that you'll never feel joy again. Anxiety insists that danger is constant and inescapable. Grief suggests that the pain will never lessen. But these voices forget the truth of impermanence. Every emotional state, no matter how intense, is temporary. Every life circumstance, no matter how challenging, is subject to change. This doesn't mean you should minimize your current experience or pretend that your pain isn't real. It means you can hold your pain within the larger context of knowing that all things pass. This knowledge can provide tremendous comfort during difficult periods. When you're in the middle of a crisis, it can feel like the crisis is your entire reality. But remembering impermanence, is like remembering that you're watching a movie. The scenes on the screen may be intense, dramatic, even frightening, but they are temporary. The movie will end and you will remain. The same principle applies to pleasant experiences. When life is going well, impermanence reminds us to appreciate what we have without clinging to it so tightly that we miss its beauty. When you know that this happy moment will not last forever, you can be fully present for it without the anxiety of trying to make it permanent. This is why the Buddha taught that attachment to pleasant experiences can be just as much a source of suffering as resistance to unpleasant ones. When we grasp desperately at happiness, trying to freeze it in time, we create tension even within joy. But when we can appreciate beauty, love, success, or any other positive experience while holding it lightly, we can enjoy it more fully precisely because we're not constantly worried about losing it. Let us sit quietly for a moment with this truth. Right now, this very moment that you're experiencing as you rest here listening to these words, this moment is unique and will never come again. The particular quality of light or darkness around you, the specific rhythm of your breathing, the exact thoughts and feelings arising in your awareness, all of this is temporary and precious. Can you feel both the poignancy and the beauty of this impermanence? Can you sense how the temporary nature of this moment makes it more precious rather than less? When we truly understand that nothing lasts forever, we begin to pay attention with the kind of presence that transforms ordinary moments into something sacred. This teaching extends to our relationship with our own lives and mortality. One of the deepest sources of human anxiety is the knowledge that this life, this body, this particular form of consciousness that we identify as ourselves is temporary. We know that someday we will die, and this knowledge can create a background fear that colors everything else. But the Buddha suggested a different way of understanding mortality. Instead of seeing death as the enemy of life, what if we could see it as life's teacher? What if the knowledge that our time here is limited could inspire us to live more fully, love more openly, waste less energy on petty concerns? When we truly accept that our lives are finite, we often discover a clarity about what actually matters. The trivial worries that once consumed so much mental energy begin to seem less important. The relationships we've been taking for granted suddenly feel precious. The experiences we've been postponing until someday become urgent invitations to live now. Many people who have faced serious illness or the death of loved ones report that these encounters with impermanence, while painful, also brought unexpected gifts. They found themselves appreciating simple pleasures they had previously overlooked. They discovered reserves of strength and wisdom they didn't know they possessed. They developed a deeper compassion for others who were suffering. They learned to say no to what didn't truly matter, and yes to what did. You don't have to wait for a crisis to access this clarity. You can begin right now to live with the awareness that this life is a temporary and precious gift. You can start treating each day as if it matters, each conversation as if it's important, each moment of beauty as if it's irreplaceable. This doesn't mean living with morbid preoccupation about death or rushing frantically through life, trying to experience everything at once. It means living with presence, with gratitude, with the kind of attention that recognizes the extraordinary nature of ordinary existence. As we explore these teachings together, let yourself feel how they land in your body, how they resonate with your own experience. You have already lived long enough to witness the truth of impermanence in countless ways. You have seen seasons change, relationships evolve, your own interests and abilities develop and shift. You have experienced the way intense emotions arise and fade, the way physical pain comes and goes, the way even your strongest beliefs and opinions can transform over time. This direct experience is your greatest teacher. You don't need to take anyone else's word for the reality of impermanence. You can observe it for yourself, moment by moment, breath by breath. And in this observation, you can begin to find the peace that comes from flowing with life, rather than fighting against it. Let us now explore how this wisdom of impermanence can free you from one of the deepest sources of suffering, the belief that you are somehow fixed and unchangeable. Many of us carry painful stories about who we are. I'm someone who always struggles with anxiety. I'm not good at relationships. I'm the kind of person who never gets ahead. These identities feel solid and permanent, but they are actually another form of attachment that creates unnecessary suffering. The truth that the Buddha discovered is that you are not a fixed, unchanging thing. You are more like a flowing stream, always moving, always changing, always becoming. The anxious thoughts you had yesterday do not define who you are today. The mistakes you made in past relationships do not determine your capacity for love now. The struggles you've faced do not limit what you can become. This understanding can bring tremendous relief. When you realize that your current experience of suffering is not a permanent feature of who you are, space opens for healing and transformation. You are not sentenced to carry the same pain forever. You are not trapped by old patterns or past mistakes. The person who feels overwhelmed today is not the same person who will wake up tomorrow. Even if similar feelings arise, they are arising in a slightly different you, a you that now has the experience of having survived today's challenges. Every moment offers the possibility of responding differently, of choosing a new direction, of letting go of what no longer serves you. When you make a mistake, you don't have to conclude that you are fundamentally flawed. When you feel afraid, you don't have to carry the identity of being a fearful person. When you experience sadness, you don't have to become someone who is always sad. All of these experiences are temporary visitors in the space of your awareness. They arise, they exist for a while, and they naturally pass away. This perspective doesn't mean that your choices don't matter, or that you can't learn from your experiences. It means that you have much more freedom to heal and grow than you might have realized. You are not sentenced to repeat the same patterns of suffering forever. You're not defined by your most difficult moments or limited by your current struggles. Every breath offers the possibility of releasing what no longer serves you. Every moment is an invitation to respond with greater wisdom and compassion. Every day gives you the chance to let go of old stories that create pain and step into new ways of being that create peace. As these teachings settle into your understanding, allow yourself to rest in the spaciousness they create. You don't have to figure everything out right now. You don't have to apply all of these insights immediately. Simply let them plant seeds in the fertile ground of your awareness. Seeds that will grow and bloom in their own perfect timing. The truth of impermanence is both profound and practical. It can provide comfort during difficult times and deeper appreciation during pleasant times. It can free you from the exhausting effort of trying to control what cannot be controlled and help you focus your energy on what actually can be influenced, your own responses and choices. In the gentle rhythm of your breathing, in the natural cycles of rest and activity, in the constant flow of thoughts and feelings through your awareness, you have a constant reminder of this truth. You are not separate from the great dance of change that moves through all existence. You are part of it, shaped by it, expressing it in your own unique way. This participation in the universal flow of change is not something to fear, but something to celebrate. It means you are fully alive, fully connected to the creative force that moves through everything. It means your life matters because it contributes to the ongoing evolution of consciousness and compassion in the world. Rest now in this understanding. Let it support you like water supports a swimmer, not by providing rigid structure, but by offering fluid responsiveness to your movements. You are held by something much larger than your personal concerns, something that knows how to navigate change with perfect wisdom, something that has been guiding the dance of existence since time began. As we continue deeper into this sacred space of rest and healing, let us gather all the gentle wisdom we have explored and allow it to settle into the deepest chambers of your heart. Like flower petals floating down to rest on still water, each teaching finds its perfect place in the lake of your awareness. We have walked together through the garden of human experience, acknowledging both the roses and the thorns. We have learned to flow like water around the obstacles of life rather than fighting against them. We have discovered the profound relief that comes from accepting what is rather than exhausting ourselves demanding what should be. We have touched the liberating truth of impermanence and felt how it frees us from the prison of trying to keep everything exactly as it is. Now, in this quiet hour, let us explore how all of these teachings weave together into a way of being that the Buddha called enlightenment. But do not think of enlightenment as some distant achievement reserved for special people. Think of it instead as the natural result of letting go of the habits that create suffering. Think of it as coming home to a peace that has always been waiting for you. There is an ancient teaching story about a person who spent years searching for a precious jewel that was said to bring perfect happiness to whoever possessed it. They traveled to distant lands, climbed treacherous mountains, consulted with wise teachers, and studied countless texts. They endured great hardships and sacrificed much in pursuit of this legendary treasure. Finally, exhausted and discouraged, they returned home empty-handed. As they sat in their own familiar room, feeling defeated and lost, their hand happened to brush against their chest. There, beneath their clothing, they felt the outline of something they had forgotten was there. It was the very jewel they had been seeking. It had been hanging around their neck on a simple cord all along, hidden beneath their travel clothes. In all their searching in external places, they had never thought to look within. In all their complex preparations and elaborate journeys, they had overlooked the simplest possibility. The treasure they sought had been with them from the very beginning. This story points to the heart of the Buddha's teaching. The peace you are seeking is not somewhere else, waiting for you to earn it, or find it, or create it. It is here now, in this very moment. closer to you than your own breath. It has been with you all along, sometimes hidden beneath layers of worry and striving and resistance, but never absent. Every moment of suffering you have experienced has been like a heavy coat thrown over this inner jewel. The suffering was real, the pain was real, the challenges were real, but underneath it all, the jewel of your true nature remained untouched, whole, perfect, waiting for you to remember it was there. All the practices we have explored tonight, all the shifts in perspective we have considered, are simply ways of removing these heavy coats one by one. Mindfulness helps you step back from identifying with every thought and emotion. Acceptance teaches you to stop fighting against your experience. Compassion shows you how to treat yourself and others with tenderness. Understanding impermanence frees you from the exhausting effort of trying to control what cannot be controlled. Each of these teachings is like gently lifting away another layer that has been obscuring your natural peace. And beneath all the layers, what do you find? Not something new that you have created, but something ancient that you have always been. Not something you have achieved, but something you can finally remember. Let me invite you now to feel for this deeper truth directly. Notice that right now, in this moment, beneath whatever thoughts or worries might be present, there is a part of you that is simply aware, simply peaceful, simply here. This awareness doesn't struggle with your problems. It doesn't judge your pain. It simply witnesses everything with gentle presence. When you rest your attention in this witnessing awareness, rather than in the content of your thoughts and feelings, something remarkable happens. The suffering that seemed so solid and overwhelming begins to feel less dense, less permanent. You realize that you are larger than any single experience of pain or difficulty. This shift doesn't eliminate challenges from your life, but it changes your relationship to them completely. Instead of being trapped inside your suffering, you discover that you are the space in which suffering appears and disappears. Instead of believing that you are your pain, you recognize that you are the awareness that knows pain is present. This recognition is the key to letting go of suffering, not by pushing away difficult experiences, but by discovering that your essential nature is already free, already peaceful, already whole. The suffering happens in the realm of thoughts and emotions, but you are the awareness in which these thoughts and emotions arise and pass away. All the practices we have explored, all the teachings we have shared, point to this simple recognition. You are not broken and in need of fixing. You are not lost and in need of finding. You are not separated from peace and in need of achieving it. Beneath all the layers of conditioning and pain and confusion, your true nature is already free from suffering. This recognition changes everything, even as nothing external needs to change. Your circumstances may remain the same, but your relationship to them transforms completely. Problems become interesting puzzles to solve rather than threats to your well-being. Emotions become passing weather rather than defining characteristics. Other people's behavior becomes information about their internal state rather than personal attacks on your peace of mind. Let us explore what this might look like in the practical details of daily life. When you wake up tomorrow morning, instead of immediately jumping into the mental list of tasks and worries, you might take a moment to simply be aware that you are aware. to notice that consciousness has returned from the mystery of sleep and is now present once again to experience whatever the day brings. This simple recognition, this gentle remembering of what you are, can set a completely different tone for your entire day. Instead of approaching the day as a problem to solve or a challenge to survive, you might approach it as an opportunity to express your natural peace and compassion in whatever forms feel most authentic. When difficulties arise during your day, instead of immediately tightening into resistance or reaching for strategies to make the difficulty go away, you might pause and ask yourself, what would it look like to meet this situation from my deeper nature? How would I respond if I remembered that I am the awareness in which this problem appears, rather than a victim of the problem? This doesn't mean becoming passive or spiritually bypassing real issues that need attention. It means responding from a place of inner stability rather than reactive panic. It means bringing the fullness of your wisdom and compassion to bear on whatever needs your attention, rather than approaching challenges from a depleted or defended state. When other people trigger frustration or hurt in you, instead of immediately believing the story that they are the source of your suffering, you might remember that your peace comes from within. This allows you to respond to their behavior from clarity rather than woundedness, to set boundaries from strength rather than defensiveness, to offer compassion even when they are acting unconsciously. When old patterns of worry or self-criticism arise in your mind, instead of getting caught up in the content of these patterns, you might recognize them as old habits of thought that no longer serve you. Like clouds passing through the sky of your awareness, you can acknowledge them without being blown around by them. As we settle deeper into this understanding together, let me share with you one more story that beautifully illustrates the nature of letting go of suffering. There was once a monastery where the monks practiced meditation in a beautiful garden. In the center of this garden stood an ancient tree with branches so wide and leaves so thick that it provided perfect shade for contemplation. One autumn, a young monk became very distressed as he watched the leaves beginning to turn color and fall from the beloved tree. He spent his meditation time worrying about the tree's apparent decline rather than focusing on his practice. He tried desperately to think of ways to prevent the leaves from falling, to keep the tree exactly as it had been during the lush summer months. An older monk noticed his distress and sat down beside him. "What troubles you so deeply?" he asked with gentle concern. "The tree is dying," the young monk replied. "Look how the leaves are falling. Soon there will be nothing left but bare branches. This beautiful shade that has supported our practice will be gone." The older monk smiled softly and gazed up at the tree with appreciation. "My friend," he said, "the tree is not dying. The tree is teaching. It is showing us the most important lesson of all. It is demonstrating how to let go with grace." The young monk looked puzzled, so the older monk continued. "The tree does not cling to its summer leaves. It does not resist the changing seasons or demand that autumn become summer again. It simply allows each phase of its existence to unfold naturally. And because it lets go completely, it will have the energy to create new leaves in the spring, often more beautiful than the ones before." "But what if the new leaves are not as beautiful?" the young monk asked. "What if next year the tree looks different?" "Then we will appreciate whatever beauty arises," the older monk replied. The tree's willingness to change is what keeps it alive and growing. If it tried to hold on to every leaf, if it resisted every season, it would exhaust itself and truly die. Its wisdom lies in its trust of the natural flow of life. The young monk sat quietly for a long time, watching the leaves fall with new eyes. Instead of seeing death and loss, he began to see trust and wisdom. Instead of witnessing destruction, he was observing a master class in the art of letting go. As winter came and the tree stood bare against the sky, the young monk discovered that its beauty had not diminished, but had simply taken a new form. The elegant architecture of its branches, usually hidden by leaves, was now fully visible. Snow gathered on its arms like jewelry. Birds that had been hidden in its summer foliage were now clearly visible as they went about their winter activities. And when spring arrived and new buds began to appear, the young monk felt a joy he had never experienced before. He realized that his attachment to the tree's summer form had actually prevented him from fully appreciating its winter beauty, and his resistance to change had blinded him to the miracle of renewal. This story offers a profound teaching about the nature of letting go of suffering. Often, we suffer not because of what is happening, but because we are attached to what was happening or anxious about what might happen. We miss the beauty and wisdom available in the present moment because we are grieving the past or fearing the future. The tree in the story represents the wisdom of your own deeper nature. Like the tree, you have the capacity to let go of what no longer serves you without losing your essential self. Like the tree, you can trust the natural cycles of growth and rest, expansion and contraction that move through all life. Like the tree, you can remain rooted in something deeper than surface appearances, while allowing your external expression to change and evolve. When you align yourself with this tree-like wisdom, suffering begins to transform. You may still experience sadness when you lose something precious, but the sadness feels clean rather than complicated. You may still feel fear when facing uncertainty, but the fear doesn't spiral into panic because you trust your ability to respond wisely to whatever arises. You may still encounter anger when witnessing injustice or cruelty, but the anger becomes fuel for compassionate action rather than poison that eats away at your peace. You may still feel loneliness when going through transitions, but the loneliness doesn't convince you that you are fundamentally alone because you remember your connection to all of life. This is what the Buddha meant when he taught about the end of suffering. Not the end of all difficult experiences, but the end of the additional suffering we create through resistance, attachment, and the illusion of separation. When these extra layers of suffering fall away like autumn leaves, what remains is your natural capacity to meet life with presence, wisdom, and love. In this moment, as you rest here listening to these words, you have the opportunity to practice this letting go. Notice any places where you might be holding tension in your body and gently allow those muscles to soften. Notice any thoughts that are creating stress or worry in your mind and gently acknowledge them without feeding them more energy. Feel your breath flowing naturally in and out, demonstrating moment by moment the art of receiving and releasing. Your lungs do not try to hold on to air that has already served its purpose. They do not anxiously grasp for the next breath before it is time. They simply participate in the rhythm of giving and receiving that sustains all life. This is the rhythm you can align yourself with in every aspect of your existence, receiving each moment as a gift, fully experiencing whatever it contains, and then releasing it to make space for whatever wants to emerge next. This is how you let go of suffering without letting go of life. This is how you find peace without avoiding pain. This is how you discover that you are already everything you have been seeking. As these teachings continue to work their gentle magic in your awareness, remember that you don't need to understand everything intellectually or apply everything perfectly. The wisdom of letting go is not a mental concept to grasp, but a natural capacity to rediscover. Like a flower that knows how to bloom without instruction, you know how to let go without effort when you stop interfering with the process. Rest now in this knowing. Let your whole being soften into the truth that suffering is optional, that peace is your birthright, and that love is your true nature. Let these words dissolve into the silence from which they arose, leaving only the vast, gentle awareness that you are. In this awareness, there is no one who suffers and nothing to let go of. There is only the eternal now, forever fresh, forever whole, forever free. As we continue our gentle exploration of letting go of suffering, let us turn our attention to the most intimate and constant teacher you carry with you always, your breath. In this very moment, as you rest here in the quietness, your breath is offering you a masterclass in the art of release, the wisdom of surrender, and the natural rhythm of letting go. Notice how your body breathes without your conscious effort. You don't have to remember to inhale or force yourself to exhale. Your lungs expand and contract in perfect timing, receiving each breath as a gift and releasing it without reluctance. This is perhaps the most profound teaching about letting go that exists, and it's happening within you right now, moment by moment, completely naturally. Your breath understands something that your worried mind often forgets. It knows that holding on creates tension and that releasing creates flow. It knows that forcing disrupts the natural rhythm and that allowing creates harmony. Each time you breathe in, you're practicing the art of receiving life fully. Each time you breathe out, you're practicing the art of letting go completely. The Buddha often used the breath as the foundation for meditation practice, not because breathing is exotic or mystical, but because it perfectly demonstrates the principles that lead to freedom from suffering. In your breath, you can observe impermanence happening moment by moment. Each breath is unique, arising fresh and passing away completely, never to be repeated exactly again. In your breath, you can practice acceptance. You don't judge the quality of each inhale or resist the necessity of each exhale. You simply allow the natural process to unfold. In your breath, you can discover presence. When you pay attention to breathing, you're automatically brought into the here and now, because breath only happens in the present moment. Let us explore how this simple attention to breathing can become a pathway out of suffering. When you're caught in a spiral of anxious thoughts, when your mind is racing with worries about the future or regrets about the past, your breath offers you an anchor in the storm. It brings you back to the only moment where peace is actually possible. This moment, right now. Feel your breath for a moment without trying to change it. Simply notice the gentle expansion as air flows in and the soft release as air flows out. Feel how your body knows exactly what to do without your mental interference. This is your first lesson in trust, in allowing life to support you without your constant management and control. Now, let us explore what happens when you begin to breathe with conscious awareness, not forcing or manipulating your breath, but simply bringing gentle attention to this natural process. As you do this, you may notice that your breathing automatically begins to slow down and deepen. This is not something you're making happen. This is your nervous system's natural response to mindful attention. This slowing and deepening of the breath signals to your entire being that it's safe to relax, safe to let go of the vigilance and tension that suffering often creates. Your body begins to soften. Your mind begins to quiet. The tight knot of worry or pain that you may have been carrying starts to loosen naturally. But the breath teaches us about more than just relaxation. It teaches us about the rhythm of engagement and release that underlies all healthy living. Just as your lungs must empty before they can fill again, there are times in life when you must let go of what you're carrying before you can receive what wants to come next. Perhaps you've been holding on to a relationship that has ended, carrying the weight of that loss like held breath. Your heart knows it needs to exhale this grief before it can inhale new love. Perhaps you've been clinging to a job or situation that no longer serves you, afraid to release what's familiar, even though it's causing you pain. Your breath reminds you that letting go is not loss, but preparation for receiving something better, aligned with who you're becoming. The breath also teaches us about the difference between effort and effortlessness. When you try too hard to breathe, when you force or control your breathing, it becomes labored and uncomfortable. But when you simply allow breathing to happen naturally while maintaining gentle awareness, it becomes a source of peace and vitality. This principle applies to every aspect of letting go of suffering. When you try to force yourself to stop feeling sad or angry or afraid, when you use willpower to push away difficult emotions, you create the same kind of labored discomfort that forced breathing creates. But when you allow emotions to move through you naturally while maintaining gentle awareness, they begin to flow like breath, arising and passing away without getting stuck. Let me share with you a story that illustrates this beautifully. There was once a woman who suffered from terrible anxiety. Her mind would race with worst-case scenarios about everything from her health to her relationships to her work. She tried many different approaches to control her anxiety. She made lists of all the things that might go wrong and planned how to prevent them. She avoided situations that triggered her worry. She used positive affirmations to try to think her way out of fear. But nothing seemed to work for very long. The anxiety would always return, often stronger than before. Finally, in desperation, she sought help from a meditation teacher who gave her a surprisingly simple instruction. When anxiety arises, don't try to get rid of it. Instead, breathe with it. At first, this advice seemed counterintuitive. Breathe with the anxiety? Wouldn't that make it worse? But the teacher explained that anxiety, like all emotions, needs space to move and transform. When we fight against it or try to push it away, we actually trap it in our bodies and minds. But when we breathe with it, we give it room to flow. The woman began practicing this approach. The next time she felt anxiety rising, instead of immediately reaching for her usual strategies of control and avoidance, she simply placed her hand on her chest and began to breathe consciously. She imagined breathing space into the tight, worried feeling in her body. She imagined breathing compassion toward the part of herself that was afraid. At first, the anxiety didn't disappear, but something remarkable happened. She noticed that she could feel anxious without being consumed by anxiety. She could have worried thoughts without believing that she was in immediate danger. The anxiety was still present, but it was present within a larger space of awareness and breath. Over time, as she continued this practice, she began to notice that anxiety would arise in her body and mind, peak for a few moments, and then naturally subside, just like waves on the ocean. She learned to surf these waves of feeling rather than being knocked over by them. She discovered that she was much stronger and more resilient than she had believed. This woman's experience illustrates a profound truth about the relationship between breath and suffering. When we breathe with our difficulties rather than holding our breath against them, we discover that we are larger than any single emotion or circumstance. We learn that we can be present with discomfort without being destroyed by it. Your breath can teach you this same lesson. The next time you notice suffering arising in your mind or body, try this gentle experiment. Instead of immediately trying to fix or escape or analyze the difficulty, simply breathe with it. Place your hand on your heart if that feels comforting. Imagine that you're breathing space around the suffering, not to make it go away, but to give it room to be present without overwhelming you. As you breathe in, you might silently say to yourself, "I acknowledge this suffering." As you breathe out, you might whisper, "I offer it space and compassion." You're not trying to solve anything or change anything. You're simply practicing the radical act of being present with your experience, while staying connected to the wisdom of your breath. This practice works because it aligns you with the natural rhythm of life, rather than against it. Instead of creating additional suffering through resistance and struggle, you're learning to flow with whatever is arising. You're discovering that you don't need to be afraid of your own emotions, thoughts, or sensations. You can meet them all with the same steady, rhythmic presence that your breath demonstrates every moment. As we continue to explore this together, let yourself sink deeper into the comfort of conscious breathing. Feel how each exhale is a small act of letting go, a tiny practice of release. Feel how each inhale is a gentle affirmation of your willingness to receive whatever this moment offers. There is another dimension to this teaching that the Buddha emphasized. He observed that when we pay close attention to our breathing, we begin to notice the subtle pause between the inhale and the exhale, and another pause between the exhale and the next inhale. In these tiny spaces of stillness, we can glimpse something profound, the peace that exists between all experiences. These pauses in the breath are like windows into your essential nature, the part of you that is always at rest even when life around you is turbulent. When you learn to find these spaces of stillness within your breathing, you begin to discover that this same stillness is available in every moment, even in the middle of difficulty. The suffering mind tells us that peace is only possible when all our problems are solved, when all our pain has disappeared, when everything in our life is exactly as we want it to be. But the breath teaches us something different. It shows us that peace is available right now, in this moment, in the space between thoughts, in the pause between worries, in the stillness that exists at the center of all activity. Let us practice finding this stillness together. As you breathe naturally, begin to notice the gentle pause at the end of each exhale, just before the next inhale begins. Don't try to extend this pause or control it. Simply notice it with gentle curiosity. In this tiny space of stillness, there is no problem to solve, no future to worry about, no past to regret. There is simply peaceful awareness. Similarly, notice the soft pause at the end of each inhale, just before the exhale begins. Again, don't manipulate this pause. Simply rest your attention there for a moment. Feel how in this space, you are neither taking in nor letting go. You are simply being, simply present, simply at peace. These moments of stillness between the breaths are training you to find the peace that exists between all experiences. Between the arising of a worried thought and your reaction to it, there is space. Between hearing difficult news and becoming upset about it, there is a pause. Between feeling an emotion and identifying yourself as that emotion, there is stillness. Learning to recognize and rest in these spaces is one of the most practical skills for letting go of suffering. When you can find the pause between stimulus and reaction, you have the opportunity to choose your response rather than being driven by old patterns. When you can rest in the stillness between thoughts, you remember that you are more than any single thought or worry. This doesn't require perfect meditation or years of practice. It simply requires the willingness to pay attention to what is already happening naturally within you. Your breath is always available as a teacher, always demonstrating the rhythm of receiving and releasing, always showing you how to be present with whatever arises without getting lost in it. As you continue to rest here, breathing naturally and peacefully, let yourself feel the profound wisdom that your body already possesses. Let yourself trust the intelligence that knows how to breathe without your management, how to heal without your worry, how to find balance without your constant adjustment. In this trust, suffering begins to lose its grip, not because problems disappear, but because you remember that you are connected to something larger than any single problem. You remember that you are part of the same intelligence that moves the breath, that beats the heart, that grows flowers from seeds, and heals cuts without conscious direction. This remembering is itself a form of letting go. You release the exhausting burden of trying to control everything and allow yourself to be supported by the same wisdom that has been breathing you since the moment you were born. In this support, in this trust, in this willingness to let your breath teach you how to live, you discover a peace that no external circumstance can disturb. Your breath continues its patient teaching, moment by moment, showing you that letting go is not something you do, but something you allow. It is not an achievement, but a relaxation. It is not a distant goal, but a present reality. As close as your next exhale, as available as your willingness to soften and receive the gifts that each moment brings. In the gentle rhythm of your breathing, in the quiet sanctuary of this moment, let us now explore one of the most transformative teachings the Buddha offered about suffering. It is the understanding that our most difficult emotions and challenging mental patterns are not enemies to be defeated, but guests to be received with wisdom and compassion. This may seem counterintuitive at first. When anger arises, when sadness overwhelms, when fear grips your heart, the natural impulse is to push these feelings away, to distract yourself from them, or to judge yourself harshly for having them. But the Buddha discovered something remarkable. The very act of fighting against our difficult emotions often creates more suffering than the emotions themselves. Imagine for a moment that your mind is like a guest house, and emotions are visitors who come to stay for a while. Some guests are pleasant and welcome. Joy arrives with flowers and laughter. Gratitude comes bearing gifts of appreciation. Love enters with warm embraces and kind words. These guests we invite in gladly and often wish would stay longer, but other guests arrive uninvited and unwelcome. Anger stomps in with heavy boots, tracking mud across our peaceful floors. Sadness enters quietly, but fills every room with grey shadows. Fear comes with urgent warnings and demands for immediate attention. Shame slinks in the back door, whispering cruel stories about our worth. Our first instinct with these difficult guests is often to slam the door, to refuse them entry, to pretend they're not knocking. But here's what the Buddha understood. When we refuse to acknowledge these visitors, they don't simply go away. They tend to knock louder, to find other ways in, to cause more disturbance than if we had simply opened the door and greeted them with presence. The practice of letting go of suffering involves learning to be a gracious host to all of your inner guests, even the ones you didn't invite. This doesn't mean you have to like them or encourage them to stay longer than necessary. It means you stop exhausting yourself fighting against their presence and instead learn to meet them with awareness and compassion. Let me share with you the story of a man who learned this lesson through years of struggling with depression. For most of his adult life, whenever he felt the dark weight of sadness descending, he would immediately spring into action. He would force himself to think positive thoughts, throw himself into busy activities, or turn to substances and distractions to avoid feeling the pain. But despite all his efforts to keep depression at bay, it would always return, often feeling heavier and more persistent than before. He began to see himself as fundamentally broken, someone who would never be free from this recurring darkness. The struggle against his depression was exhausting him more than the depression itself. One day, during a particularly difficult period, he was too tired to fight anymore. He simply sat with the sadness, too depleted to resist or distract himself. And in that moment of complete surrender, something unexpected happened. He noticed that the depression, while painful, wasn't actually dangerous. It was just an experience moving through him, like weather moving through the sky. As he continued to sit with the feeling rather than fighting against it, he began to sense its texture, its rhythm, its message. He realized that his depression often arose when he had been pushing himself too hard, neglecting his need for rest and reflection. The sadness was actually trying to tell him something important about his life, something he had been too busy to hear. Over time, he learned to greet his depression differently. When he felt it approaching, instead of panicking or immediately reaching for distractions, he would make space for it. He would say, both to himself and to the feeling, "I see you. I understand you're here. What do you need me to know?" This shift from resistance to receptivity changed everything. The depression still visited from time to time, but it no longer felt like a life sentence. It became more like a teacher, arriving to remind him when he was out of balance, when he needed to slow down, when he had been disconnected from his deeper values and needs. This man's experience illustrates a profound truth about emotional suffering. Often, our pain contains important information, and when we refuse to listen to it, it has to speak louder to get our attention. But when we learn to listen with presence and compassion, even our most difficult emotions can become sources of wisdom and healing. Now let us explore how you can begin to practice this welcoming approach with your own difficult guests. The next time you notice a challenging emotion arising, perhaps anxiety about an upcoming event or frustration with a situation you cannot control, try this gentle experiment. Instead of immediately trying to make the feeling go away, pause and take a conscious breath. Place your hand on your heart if that feels supportive. Then speak silently to the emotion, as if it were a guest at your door. I notice you're here, anxiety. I may not like having you as a visitor, but I'm willing to acknowledge your presence. What do you want me to know? Then listen, not with your analytical mind trying to solve or fix, but with your heart, with the same gentle attention you might offer to a friend who was in pain. What is this emotion trying to tell you? What need or concern is it pointing toward? What wisdom might it carry, even wrapped in discomfort? You might discover that your anxiety is actually love in disguise, worried about someone or something you care about deeply. You might find that your anger is passion for justice that hasn't yet found a skillful expression. You might realize that your sadness is grief for something precious that you've lost, and that this grief is actually honoring the depth of your capacity to love. This practice of listening to difficult emotions rather than immediately trying to escape them is not the same as wallowing in them or feeding them dramatic stories. It's about meeting your inner experience with the same compassion you would offer to a dear friend who was struggling. When a friend comes to you with a broken heart, you don't tell them to stop feeling sad. You don't minimize their pain or rush them through their grief. You offer presence, understanding, and space for their feelings to be felt and expressed. The invitation now is to offer this same quality of presence to your own inner experience. As you practice this approach, you may begin to notice something remarkable. When difficult emotions are met with presence rather than resistance, they often begin to shift and transform naturally, like clouds that gather, rain, and then disperse. Emotions that are allowed to be felt fully often resolve more quickly than emotions that are fought against or suppressed. This doesn't mean that all emotional pain disappears immediately when you stop resisting it. Some grief needs time to be processed. Some anger needs to be felt and understood before it can be released. Some fear needs to be acknowledged before courage can arise. But when you stop adding the extra layer of suffering that comes from fighting your feelings, the original emotion can do its work and move through you more efficiently. Let us explore this more deeply through another story. There was once a woman who carried a deep well of anger about injustices she had witnessed and experienced in her life. This anger felt dangerous to her, so she spent enormous energy trying to keep it contained. She was always pleasant, always accommodating, always trying to maintain peace, even when her boundaries were being violated. But the more she suppressed her anger, the more it leaked out in other ways. She became critical and judgmental toward others. She developed physical symptoms like headaches and digestive problems. She felt disconnected from her own power and vitality. The effort of keeping her anger locked away was exhausting her. Finally, she decided to try a different approach. In the safety of her own home, during quiet meditation time, she allowed herself to feel the anger fully. She didn't act on it or express it toward others. She simply let herself experience the sensation of anger in her body, the heat and energy and intensity of it. As she continued this practice over time, something beautiful began to unfold. She discovered that underneath her anger was a fierce love for justice and truth. She realized that her anger was actually a healthy response to unhealthy situations. It was her inner wisdom trying to tell her that something was wrong and needed to be addressed. Armed with this understanding, she began to find skillful ways to express her anger. She learned to set clear boundaries with people who were taking advantage of her kindness. She found ways to channel her passion for justice into meaningful activism and advocacy. Her anger became fuel for positive change rather than a force of destruction. This transformation was only possible because she stopped treating her anger as an enemy and started listening to it as a messenger. She learned to separate the emotion itself from the actions she might take in response to it. She could feel angry without being cruel. She could acknowledge injustice without becoming bitter. She could access her power without causing harm. This principle applies to all difficult emotions. Sadness can become a gateway to compassion. Fear can become a doorway to wisdom. Loneliness can open our hearts to connection. Frustration can fuel creative problem solving, but only when we stop running from these feelings and start listening to what they have to teach us. As we continue this exploration together, let yourself feel into any emotions that might be present right now. Perhaps there's a subtle anxiety about tomorrow's responsibilities. Maybe there's a lingering sadness about something that didn't go as hoped. There might be frustration with yourself for not being further along in your healing or growth. Whatever feelings are present, even if they're just quiet background sensations, try meeting them with this new approach. Instead of judging them as wrong or trying to make them disappear, breathe with them. Acknowledge them as part of your current human experience. Thank them for whatever information they might be carrying. You might say silently, "Thank you, worry, for showing me how much I care about doing well tomorrow." Or, "Thank you, sadness, for honoring the importance of what I hoped for." Or, "Thank you, frustration, for pointing me toward my desire to grow and heal." This practice of gratitude toward difficult emotions may feel strange at first, but it's based on a profound recognition. These feelings arise because you care about your life, because you have values and hopes and loves that matter to you. Even painful emotions are often expressions of something beautiful in you. Your capacity to love, to hope, to care deeply about your experience and the experience of others. When you begin to see difficult emotions this way, they lose some of their power to overwhelm you. You realize that feeling angry doesn't make you an angry person. Experiencing fear doesn't make you a coward. Having sad thoughts doesn't mean you're a sad person. These are simply experiences moving through the vast space of your awareness. Now, let us explore how this understanding can help you work with repetitive thought patterns that create suffering. Many of us have familiar mental loops that our minds return to again and again. Maybe it's worry about health or finances. Perhaps it's replaying old conversations or imagining future scenarios that may never happen. These thought patterns can feel like prisons, trapping us in cycles of mental suffering. But here too, the practice of welcoming, rather than fighting, can be transformative. When you notice your mind starting down a familiar path of worry or rumination, instead of immediately trying to stop the thoughts, try greeting them like old acquaintances. "Oh, hello. Worry about money. I see you're visiting again. I know you think you're helping me by rehearsing all the things that could go wrong." Then, instead of getting caught up in the content of the worried thoughts, you can step back and observe the pattern itself with gentle curiosity. What triggers these thoughts? What need are they trying to meet? Are they genuinely helping you prepare for something, or are they just spinning in circles without purpose? Often repetitive thought patterns are like old records that got stuck in a groove. They keep playing the same song over and over, not because the song is particularly helpful, but because that's where the needle got stuck. When you approach these patterns with awareness rather than resistance, you can sometimes gently lift the needle and allow new music to play. This might sound something like, "I notice my mind is playing the 'what if something terrible happens' song again. This is just what minds do sometimes. I don't have to join in the singing. I can let this song play in the background while I bring my attention to what's actually happening right now." Sometimes you might discover that beneath repetitive worry is a genuine concern that needs attention. Maybe your anxiety about finances is pointing toward a need to create a budget or have an important conversation. Maybe your rumination about a relationship is highlighting something that needs to be addressed or accepted. When repetitive thoughts carry useful information, you can thank them and take appropriate action. When they're just spinning without purpose, you can acknowledge them with compassion and gently redirect your attention to the present moment. The key is learning to respond to your mental patterns from a place of choice rather than compulsion. You begin to see that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that notices thoughts arising and passing away. From this perspective, even the most challenging mental patterns become workable. As these teachings settle into your understanding, allow yourself to feel the relief that comes with this new approach. You don't have to be at war with your own mind and emotions. You don't have to achieve perfect mental and emotional states to deserve peace and happiness. You can learn to dance with all of your inner guests, the welcome and unwelcome alike. This dancing with difficulty is actually a profound form of self-love. It's the recognition that all aspects of your humanity deserve compassion, even the parts that feel uncomfortable or unwanted. When you can embrace your full emotional and mental experience with presence and kindness, you discover a freedom that no external circumstance can take away. In the gentle darkness surrounding you now, in the rhythm of your natural breathing, let yourself rest in this understanding. You are large enough to hold whatever emotions visit you. You are wise enough to learn from whatever thoughts arise. You are compassionate enough to meet all of your inner guests with presence and care. This presence, this willingness to be with what is, rather than fighting against it, is the foundation of all healing. It's the ground from which true transformation grows. Not the forceful transformation that tries to eliminate parts of yourself, but the organic transformation that naturally occurs when all aspects of your being feel seen, heard, and accepted. Rest now in this acceptance. Let it support you like warm water supports a tired body. You are exactly where you need to be in your journey of learning to let go of suffering. Every difficult emotion you've experienced has been teaching you something about the depth of your capacity to feel and care. Every challenging thought pattern has been showing you something about how much you want to live well. Trust this process. Trust your ability to learn and grow and heal. Trust that you already have everything you need to work skillfully with whatever arises in your inner landscape. The peace you seek is not found by eliminating all difficult guests, but by learning to be a wise and compassionate host to the full spectrum of human experience. As we draw together all the threads of wisdom we have explored in this gentle journey, let us turn toward the most practical and profound question of all. How do we live this understanding of letting go in the midst of our daily lives? How do we carry the peace we've touched here into our relationships, our work, our challenges, and our ordinary moments? The path of letting go of suffering is not something we walk only in quiet meditation or peaceful moments of reflection. It is a way of being that can transform every interaction, every decision, every response to the countless situations that make up a human life. It is an art that deepens with practice, becoming more natural and graceful the more we trust its wisdom. Let us begin with perhaps the most challenging arena for practicing release: our relationships with other people. So much of our daily suffering comes from our expectations of how others should behave, our need to control how we are perceived, and our resistance to the natural rhythms of connection and separation that characterize all human bonds. Consider the last time someone disappointed you. Perhaps a friend cancelled plans at the last minute, or a family member responded to your kindness with criticism, or a colleague took credit for work you had done. In these moments, the mind immediately creates a story. This shouldn't have happened. They should have been more considerate. They don't value me enough. This proves that people can't be trusted. But what if you could meet these situations with the same wisdom your breath demonstrates? What if, instead of holding on to the disappointment like held breath, you could allow it to move through you naturally, acknowledging the hurt without letting it define the entire relationship or your worth as a person? This doesn't mean becoming passive or accepting mistreatment. It means responding from clarity rather than reactivity. When someone behaves in a way that hurts or disappoints you, you can acknowledge your feelings, set appropriate boundaries, and make wise choices about how to proceed, all without carrying the poison of resentment or the burden of trying to change who they are. There is a profound freedom in releasing others from the impossible task of meeting all your needs and expectations. When you stop demanding that your partner never be moody, that your children always make choices you approve of, that your friends always be available when you need them, you free yourself from the constant disappointment that comes with these impossible demands. More importantly, you free yourself to appreciate people as they actually are, rather than constantly measuring them against how you think they should be. You begin to see their humanity, their struggles, their own journey of learning and growth. You can love them for their unique combination of strengths and limitations, rather than loving only an idealized version that exists only in your mind. Let me share with you the story of a woman who learned this lesson through a difficult relationship with her aging mother. For years, she had hoped that her mother would finally become the warm, emotionally available parent she had always longed for. She tried countless approaches to create the closeness she craved, bringing thoughtful gifts, sharing personal stories, planning special outings. But her mother remained who she had always been: practical, reserved, uncomfortable with emotional intimacy. Each interaction left the daughter feeling rejected and frustrated. She would replay conversations, analyzing what she had said wrong, planning different approaches for next time. The relationship became a source of constant suffering for both of them. Finally, after years of this painful pattern, the daughter decided to try a different approach. Instead of going into each visit, hoping to change her mother or create a different dynamic, she began practicing acceptance of who her mother actually was. She stopped taking her mother's emotional distance personally and started seeing it as her mother's own form of protection, developed through her own life experiences. This shift changed everything. When her mother offered practical help instead of emotional warmth, the daughter learned to receive this as her mother's way of showing love. When conversations remained on safe, surface topics, she stopped trying to force deeper sharing and instead appreciated the peace of these gentle exchanges. Most remarkably, when the daughter stopped pushing for the relationship to be different, space opened for appreciation of what it actually was. She began to see her mother's quiet strength, her reliability, her own form of caring that expressed itself through actions rather than words. The relationship became a source of peace rather than suffering, not because her mother changed, but because the daughter learned to love what was, instead of grieving what was not. This same principle of loving acceptance can transform every relationship in your life. When you release people from the burden of being different than they are, you create space for authentic connection. When you stop trying to fix or change others, you free up enormous energy for your own growth and happiness. But perhaps even more challenging than releasing control over others is learning to release control over your own life circumstances. So much suffering comes from our resistance to situations we cannot change. Illnesses we didn't choose, losses we couldn't prevent, changes we didn't initiate. The practice of letting go involves learning to distinguish between what you can influence and what you must learn to accept. This doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up on positive change. It means directing your energy skillfully, focusing on the areas where your efforts can actually make a difference while releasing the struggle in areas beyond your control. You can work to improve your health while accepting that aging and illness are part of the human experience. You can nurture your relationships while accepting that all connections eventually change or end. You can pursue meaningful work while accepting that external success cannot guarantee lasting happiness. The wisdom tradition speaks of this as learning to be like water, persistent in moving toward your goals, but fluid in adapting to obstacles and changes in the landscape. Water doesn't stop flowing when it encounters a rock. It finds a way around, sometimes carving a new channel, sometimes taking a completely different path, but always maintaining its essential nature while responding wisely to conditions. Let us explore what this kind of fluid persistence might look like in your own life. Perhaps you've been struggling with a health condition that limits your activities. Instead of exhausting yourself, fighting against these limitations, or bitter about how your life has changed, you might ask, given these current conditions, how can I live most fully? What new forms of meaning and joy are available to me that I might not have discovered if my life had remained the same? Or perhaps you're facing financial challenges that have forced you to simplify your lifestyle. Rather than dwelling on what you've had to give up, you might explore, What has this situation taught me about what truly matters? What strengths have I developed through learning to live with less? How might this experience deepen my compassion for others facing similar struggles? This approach doesn't deny the real difficulties of challenging circumstances. It simply adds another layer of possibility, the opportunity to discover that you are larger and more resilient than you may have realized, that meaning and peace are available even in the midst of unwanted change. The practice of letting go also extends to your relationship with time itself. So much modern suffering comes from our resistance to the natural rhythms of life, wanting to speed up healing processes, trying to force relationships to develop more quickly, becoming impatient with the gradual nature of personal growth. But wisdom traditions have always understood that everything has its own timing. Seeds planted in spring don't produce fruit immediately, no matter how much we might want them to. Grief doesn't resolve according to our preferred timeline. Trust develops slowly in relationships. Deep changes in personality and perspective often take years to integrate fully. When you align yourself with the natural timing of life rather than fighting against it, a different kind of peace becomes possible. You can plant seeds of positive change and then allow them to grow at their own pace. You can do your part in healing relationships while accepting that some repairs take time and patience from all parties involved. This doesn't mean becoming passive or losing your sense of purpose. It means holding your goals and intentions lightly, working steadily toward them while remaining open to the possibility that they may manifest differently than you expect or on a different timeline than you prefer. One of the most profound areas for practicing release is in your relationship with your own past. Many people carry enormous suffering in the form of regret about decisions they made or didn't make, relationships they damaged or lost, opportunities they missed or mishandled. This backward-looking suffering can consume tremendous energy that could otherwise be available for creating positive change in the present. The practice of letting go involves learning to make peace with your own history, not by pretending that mistakes didn't happen or that you wouldn't choose differently if you could, but by recognizing that the past is beyond your power to change. The only moment where you have any real influence is this moment, right now. This means forgiving yourself for your human imperfections, for the times you acted from fear instead of love, for the decisions you made with incomplete information or limited wisdom. It means recognizing that every choice you made was the best you could do, given your level of awareness and skill at that time. This self-forgiveness is not a one-time event, but an ongoing practice. Each time you notice your mind returning to old regrets, you can gently redirect your attention to the present moment and ask, what can I learn from this memory that might help me choose more wisely now? How can I use this experience to develop greater compassion for myself and others who are also imperfect and learning? Sometimes this process includes making amends where possible and appropriate. But even when direct repair isn't feasible, you can honor your past mistakes by living more consciously in the present, by treating others with greater kindness, by making choices that align with your deepest values. As we explore these teachings together, let yourself feel how they might apply to the specific challenges and relationships in your own life. Where are you holding on too tightly? What would it feel like to soften your grip just a little? Where are you fighting against reality in ways that create unnecessary suffering? How might you practice flowing around obstacles instead of trying to force them out of your way? The beautiful truth about the practice of letting go is that it becomes easier with experience. Each time you choose acceptance over resistance, each time you respond to difficulty with presence rather than reactivity, each time you meet your own imperfections with compassion rather than criticism, you strengthen your capacity for peace. Like learning to swim or ride a bicycle, the movements that once felt awkward and uncertain gradually become natural and graceful. You begin to trust your ability to handle whatever life brings. You develop confidence in your resilience, your wisdom, your capacity to find meaning and beauty even in challenging circumstances. This doesn't mean that life becomes problem-free or that you never feel difficult emotions. It means that you develop a different relationship to both problems and emotions. They become temporary weather patterns in the sky of your awareness rather than permanent definitions of your reality. Let us rest for a moment in the recognition of how far you've already come in this understanding. Simply by listening to these teachings, by opening your heart to new ways of being, by questioning old patterns that no longer serve you, you are already practicing the art of letting go. You are already demonstrating the courage and wisdom that this path requires. In the gentle rhythm of your breathing, in the quiet space of this moment, you can feel the truth of what you've learned. You are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not your circumstances. You are the awareness in which all of these arise and pass away. You are the space in which life unfolds, the consciousness that witnesses all experiences without being defined by any single one. This recognition is not a philosophical concept, but a lived reality that you can return to in any moment. When life feels overwhelming, when relationships become difficult, when circumstances challenge your peace, you can remember, I am the sky, and all of this is just weather passing through. From this perspective, letting go of suffering is not something you do, but something you remember. You remember that your essential nature is already free, already peaceful, already whole. You remember that you don't need to earn peace by solving all your problems or eliminating all difficult emotions. Peace is what you are when you stop struggling against what is. As these teachings continue to deepen in your understanding, trust the natural process of integration. Some insights will click immediately and begin transforming your experience right away. Others will plant seeds that will bloom in their own perfect timing. Some lessons will need to be learned over and over until they become as natural as breathing. This is the way of all profound learning. Be patient with yourself. Be gentle with your human tendency to forget and remember, to understand intellectually before embodying emotionally, to progress gradually rather than all at once. The path of letting go of suffering is not a destination to reach, but a way of walking through life with greater ease and grace. In relationships, you can practice seeing others clearly without the filter of your expectations and demands. In challenging circumstances, you can practice responding from wisdom rather than reacting from fear. In your daily activities, you can practice presence rather than rushing toward the next moment. In your quiet times, you can practice gratitude for what is rather than longing for what is not. Each of these small practices contributes to the larger transformation that occurs when you align yourself with the natural flow of life, rather than fighting against it. You begin to move through your days with less effort and more grace. You find yourself arguing less with reality and appreciating more of what each moment offers. This is the fruit of the practice, not a life without challenges, but a life lived with wisdom, not the elimination of all difficult emotions, but the capacity to meet them with presence and compassion, not control over all circumstances, but the ability to respond skillfully to whatever arises. As you rest here now, breathing naturally and peacefully, let yourself receive these teachings as gifts for your ongoing journey. Let them settle into your heart like seeds planted in fertile soil. Trust that they will grow and bloom in their own perfect timing, supporting you in countless moments yet to come. You have everything you need to practice the art of letting go of suffering. You have the breath that teaches you about natural rhythm and release. You have the awareness that can witness all experiences without being overwhelmed by them. You have the heart that knows how to meet life with compassion and courage. Most importantly, you have this moment, right now, where peace is always available, where love is always present, where the possibility of freedom from suffering is as close as your willingness to soften, to open, to let go of the struggle and rest in what is. In this letting go, you discover that you haven't lost anything essential. You have simply remembered who you have always been beneath all the stories of struggle and separation. The journey continues, moment by moment, breath by breath, choice by choice. And in each moment, the invitation remains the same: to release what binds you and embrace what frees you, to let go of suffering and discover the peace that has been waiting patiently for your return. And so, dear friend, as our time together draws to a gentle close, let these final words wrap around you like the softest blanket, carrying you into the deepest rest. In this sacred space we have shared, you have touched something ancient and eternal, something that will continue to unfold in your life long after these words fade into silence. Through these gentle hours, you have walked a path that countless beings have traveled before you. You have breathed with the Buddha's wisdom, felt the compassion of ages past, and discovered that the peace you seek has been with you all along. This is not knowledge that can be lost or taken away. It has become part of you now, woven into the very fabric of your understanding. You have learned that suffering, while painful, is not your enemy, but your teacher. You have discovered that the very act of fighting against your experience often creates more pain than the experience itself. You have touched the profound truth that you are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not your circumstances, but the vast, gentle awareness in which all of these arise and pass away like clouds in an endless sky. In the rhythm of your breath, you have found a constant companion, always available to guide you back to the present moment when your mind wanders into stories of past regret or future worry. Your breath knows the wisdom of receiving and releasing, of holding nothing too tightly, of flowing with life rather than against it. This teacher travels with you always, as close as your next inhale, as reliable as your next exhale. You have learned to welcome even your most difficult emotions as guests in the guest house of your heart. No longer do you need to waste precious energy fighting against anger, sadness, fear, or loneliness. Instead, you can greet them with presence, listen to their messages, and allow them to move through you naturally, like weather patterns in the sky of your being. You have discovered that acceptance is not defeat, but wisdom. That letting go is not loss, but freedom. That surrendering control is not weakness, but the greatest strength, aligning you with the natural flow of life that knows how to heal, how to grow, how to find balance without your constant interference. In your relationships, you now carry the understanding that others like you are walking their own path of learning and awakening. You can love them without demanding that they be different, support them without trying to fix them, and set boundaries without closing your heart. This wisdom transforms every interaction into an opportunity for compassion rather than a test of your peace. You have seen how impermanence, rather than being a source of fear, can become a source of profound comfort. Everything that causes you pain will pass. Every difficult circumstance will change. Every overwhelming emotion will naturally subside. And in this knowing, you find the courage to feel fully without being consumed, to engage completely without being attached. Most beautifully, you have recognized that beneath all the stories of struggle and inadequacy, beneath all the layers of conditioning and pain, your true nature remains untouched and whole. Like a jewel hidden beneath accumulated dust, your essential peace has been waiting patiently for you to remember it was there. This remembering is not an achievement, but a homecoming, not a destination, but a recognition of where you have always been. As you carry these teachings into your waking life, remember that the path of letting go of suffering is not about perfection. It is about practice, about returning again and again to presence, to compassion, to the willingness to meet life as it is, rather than as you think it should be. Each time you choose awareness over reactivity, each time you respond to difficulty with kindness rather than resistance, you are walking this ancient path with courage and grace. There will be days when you forget everything you have learned here, when old patterns reassert themselves, when suffering feels solid and permanent once again. This forgetting is not failure, but part of the natural rhythm of learning. Like waves on the shore, understanding comes and goes, each return bringing you a little deeper into wisdom, a little closer to lasting peace. Be patient with yourself as you would be patient with a dear friend who is learning something new and challenging. Celebrate the small victories, the moments when you catch yourself before reacting, the times when you choose compassion over judgment, the breath when you remember that you are the sky and not the clouds. Know that every step you take on this path of liberation benefits not only you, but all beings. Your peace contributes to the peace of the world. Your willingness to heal your own suffering makes space for others to heal theirs. Your courage to face difficulty with presence and compassion inspires the same courage in others, often in ways you may never see, but that ripple outward like gentle waves in an infinite ocean. As sleep begins to claim you now, let your body sink completely into rest. Feel how your muscles know how to soften without your direction, how your breath knows how to slow and deepen naturally, how your mind knows how to release the day's concerns and drift into the healing silence of dreams. In this letting go into sleep, you practice the ultimate release. You surrender control of your consciousness, trusting the natural intelligence of your being to restore and renew you. You demonstrate your faith in the rhythms of rest and activity, of expansion and contraction, of holding and releasing that govern all of life. Rest now in this knowing. Let the wisdom you have received settle into the deepest places of your being, where it will continue its gentle work of transformation even as you sleep. Trust that when you wake, you will carry with you not just the memory of these teachings, but their living presence, their active power to transform suffering into peace, resistance into flow, separation into love. In this release, in this trust, in this gentle surrender to the rhythms of rest and renewal, may you find the deepest peace. May your dreams be filled with the light of understanding. May you wake refreshed and renewed, carrying the gifts of this journey into all the moments yet to come.
Rest now, release now, let go now into the infinite embrace of peace that has been waiting for you all along. You are home.
Thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk. Sleep well.